Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
So we talked about the modern application layer and how customers are increasingly using leading apps like yours. We have leaders here from Okta, from Splunk, from Asana. So perhaps I can have you introduce yourselves first to the audience.
Should I start?
Yes, please. Eugenio?
I'm Eugenio or Eugenio. I don't even know how to pronounce my own name. But for the last 2 years and a half, I have led the customer identity product unit at Okta. I joined Okta through the acquisition of my company. My company was called Auth0, and I was born here in Seattle. I'm a local native, Pacific Northwestern. And Auth0 was in the same space in customer identity, and I did that for many years. Before that, I was in the developer division at Microsoft. So I'm a developer at heart.
Thank you, Eugenio.
Yep.
Patrick, I'll pass it to you.
Yes, hello everybody, I'm Patrick. I lead global technical sales at Splunk, which is our global customer-facing teams across both security and observability. Like Eugenio, I joined Splunk about 2 years ago when my company was acquired. The company was a cyber intelligence platform. So similar to App Fabric, we helped our customers integrate and normalize threat intelligence into their detection and response tools that security teams use in the enterprise. Prior to TrueStar, the company was called TrueStar. Prior to TrueStar, I was a security analyst by trade, and I built security analyst and security operations teams. So I can relate to some of the challenges that you were talking about in your presentation.
Thank you, Patrick. And Alex from Asana?
Sure. Hey, I'm Alex Hood. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Asana. I've been at Asana for, like 5.5 years. And we've just grown very, very quickly because a lot of the problems that you just talked about. It's harder to get work done. It is more distracting to switch between applications. And when applications don't talk, or when there's like a lack of a single source of truth, work gets harder. Before Asana, I was in charge of QuickBooks Online at Intuit. Thank you, Alex.
Sure. Yeah, super exciting, as you mentioned, Alex and Eugenio and Patrick as well. It is very clear that customers are using more and more best-in-class, purpose-built applications to do their job, and this is really crucial for them. Perhaps, Eugenio, we could start with you. So I'm a big fan of the Okta Business at Work report. It's got great data. It's always showing the hot apps. Perhaps you could share a bit as to where you see the SaaS world moving in terms of the applications that are out there.
I think the one word that summarizes is more. I think it's going to be more and more apps, and the software that we are going to be using in the next 5 years and 7 years is being written now. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to see an explosion of new apps because of this dichotomy of should I build it myself or should I source it from experts? And so any company needs to balance the resources and figure out what is it worth to spend. You mentioned it during your presentation. What is it worth spending time on? Should I build all this normalization thing or should I just plug it in and use it and focus my team on what's important to me?
Thank you.
Going to happen.
Yes, great point. I want to talk a bit about the purpose-built apps and why you think customers are adopting more and more of that. So perhaps Patrick and Alex, I can direct this to you. What do you think is driving the increase in demand among these purpose-built SaaS applications?
Okay. Yeah, when we start, well, I think we've seen a Cambrian explosion of applications across our customers. We have 15,000 customers at Splunk. On average, like the data you showed, our average customer has over 100 SaaS applications. But when we look at financial services, healthcare, across industries, really our biggest customers have hundreds of applications.
That's right.
And I think what's driving it is the ability for these applications to solve deeper and more nuanced problems for customers. But it's also being driven, we were talking about this a little bit before, it's also being driven by the low cost of barrier to entry. Companies like AWS make it easier for startups to create applications that solve very specific problems. And I think that's leading to some fantastic solutions that customers want to bring into their environment. But then the challenge is integration normalization.
Yeah, we're in the four walls of the company that brought the Kindle to market, which is the ultimate purpose-built tool. And it's delightful because it does one thing excruciatingly well. It's like every detail's been thought of. And that's how Asana thinks of itself, and that's how other tools are executing as well. So the form factor of how folks have normally worked together has been really, still hasn't changed that much from the Microsoft 3.1 days of email, maybe chat and spreadsheets, but those tools don't serve that well anymore for like cross-functional work and the work of the modern information worker. So it's evolving and folks are adopting those in greater number. The danger is that folks switch between 16 apps a day.
That's right.
They switch sometimes thousands of times. An enterprise spends on average up to $65 billion they have 65 different apps that they purchase and have to manage. So that complexity is the cost of really well-built solutions.
It's a great point. And I think we're going to hear some more research that your team has done on that later.
Right.
Yes. Patrick, perhaps we could talk a bit about your IT and security users with Splunk. Why do you think it's important for them to have access to normalized SaaS logs?
Yeah, I mean, look, our customers look at this from the perspective of what they call digital resilience, which for them is the ability to detect and respond both malicious compromises, so think about an insider threat or an external threat actor, but also adverse conditions. So think about failures, outages, unplanned downtime across your infrastructure, your services, and your applications. And so our customers are demanding, like the first step of improving your digital resilience is to have increased visibility across those things. And the application layer, whether it's SaaS apps, but you also got complexity introduced from on-prem apps or homegrown purpose-built apps. And so what App Fabric really provides is easier visibility into the application layer for both malicious compromises and adverse conditions. And if you think about things like impossible logins, if you think about things like configuration changes, if you think about things like privilege escalations, all of those could signal threats to digital resilience for the enterprise. And so having more accurate, broader visibility into that application layer will help our customers improve their digital resilience.
That's a great point. Thank you. Let's talk a bit about integrating applications together. And you've all talked about the number of them out there and some of the challenges folks face. So perhaps we could start first with the sort of point-to-point integrations, and maybe I'll get Eugenio, you and Patrick's opinion from Okta and Splunk's point of view first. What challenges do your customers face when it comes to building and maintaining these point-to-point integrations?
Well, the building of apps, the building of SaaS applications, they also face the same dichotomy of, should I build or should I buy for ourselves? So it's like a fractal problem.
Yeah.
So when you're building a SaaS app and you are expected to be in a larger ecosystem, you are thinking about the functionality you provide, but then you also need to think about when that application is going to fly over the radar in a larger organization, where concerns like security or data integration, manageability, observability become really important. So it's not like the small tool that somebody uses in a department that nobody else knows about. It's the tool that grows into the larger footprint of the company. And then all of those concerns become very important. And so from an application builder perspective, how do you build an app that can, maybe it's easy to test, easy to try, easy to play around a little bit, and when it expands, it's ready to be adopted widely in a secure way by an organization. And doing that, it's hard. It requires expertise, it requires knowledge, and it requires a skill set that maybe if you're a growing company, you might not have. You might know a lot about like the specific domain that you're tackling with your app, but all those other cross-functional or like more like non-functional requirements become a really challenge.
That's true.
Things like App Fabric will make that easier.
Yeah, it's interesting. We spoke with an IT leader at a major tech company last night, And he talked about the exponential problem of this, that it's a factorial problem because as a number of apps integrate, you got to integrate with each one. So it's an exponentially challenging problem, as you mentioned there.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, Patrick?
I mean, I would just add that, when we talk to chief information security officers and CIOs in our customer base, they just want it to work. They don't necessarily want to get involved in all the nuance of the integration debt. They don't want to have these ontological discussions about what the schema should be and what the data model should be. They just want it to work. And they want their investments in these purpose-built solutions to work for their employees and to work for their customers. And so what I like about what AWS has done here, and Splunk has been very proud to partner with you all on the open cybersecurity schema framework, which it really abstracts away from those tedious discussions about data models and asserts a standard that I think can really move us forward in starting to solve this integration debt problem that comes with the power of the explosion of SaaS applications.
For sure. I think that's a great point, and it's about how do we make this actionable for the security users on day one, right?
Yeah.
They don't have to do normalization work or anything, and it's useful for
they don't care. They just want it to work.
And they want it quickly.
That's right. Yeah, right away.
Those integrations take a lot of time
For sure.
to get it right. And so putting in place, functionality that allows you to do it fast, I think is becoming more important too.
That's right. Alex, question for you around the knowledge workers using Asana. How does Asana see collaboration and productivity evolving with generative AI and App Fabric?
Yeah, well, it's exciting because teams tend to have 3 different sets of tools that they use. They have a place where their communications occurs, like Slack or email. They have a place where the content lives, like Dropbox. And then they have a plan of record of like who's doing what by when, like the project plan. And when those things are disconnected, that's where you get a lot of that context switching that's required. But when they're deeply connected, then you can be doing deep work and then update the plan of record. You can be getting information from your communications area and also be looking and reviewing some of the content. So we're excited because a lot of the folks that use Asana are tracking their work, or they're seeing how the dependencies of how the work that it needs to get done helps them be more successful. But then they can also grow further out into the other applications where work is getting done and have that surfaced inside Asana. And we're going to show a couple of demos today of how that actually is coming to shape.
Very cool.
Yeah, so generative AI is the opportunity to either explode the amount of context that's out there, or it can help distill and synthesize inside of Asana for like what you should be doing next.
Fantastic, Alex. One more follow-up question to that,
Sure.
and I know we're going to hear more today, but perhaps you could tell us more about the value for Asana users to be able to stay, and because you have a lot of users that engage with Asana a lot,
Right.
the value for them to stay in the app versus having to switch to others.
Yeah, I think anytime you're planning your intention or you're planning how you're going to spend your time and try to get work done, if you've got the information at your fingertips to be able to do that well, instead of losing pace by switching and content shifting, that's very, very powerful. Also, what Asana does sort of uniquely well is it gives you context on how to do your job. So it starts out with a project and you have like that context and then your tasks in there. But then having the information pulled from all these different partners that you showed on your slide, have that be part of the context that is shared with the individual. Now they have full context so that they can really do a good job and thrive in their work and spend less of that time looking for status or hunting around for that lost bit of information in their blind spot, which was going to hamper their ability to execute.
That's definitely true. Patrick, I'm curious from a security user point of view, where do you see Splunk and generative AI going?
Well, it's funny. I was just thinking your example of a user working through a project and their tasks is very similar to when you think about a security analyst in the SOC or an IT analyst in the NOC or a DevOps team, an SRE team investigating an issue, right? You can do that work within our products at Splunk, but being able to connect into all of the different places where context may live that will help you accelerate the outcome of that investigation is where we're really driving at Splunk. But when we think about generative AI specifically, we like to think in terms of like concentric circles. And at the most tactical level, where we're really driving to innovate for our customers is to help them generate detections faster using generative AI, help recommend what are the right, and when I say detections, I mean like anomaly detections across infrastructure, services, and application layer to really understand how their systems are performing and where things may be going wonky. So that's sort of thing one. Thing two, when you move out to sort of more operational, Splunk has a domain-specific query language. It's called SPL. We think it's particularly elegant and great, but it also takes a lot of time to master that kind of domain-specific language and to really experience the full power of products like Splunk and that Splunk has. You have to master that language. Now, what generative AI does is it brings down the barrier of mastering those languages.
That's right.
And it will make it easier for our users and our customers to more quickly become power users. And that's something that's super exciting for us because that will not only bring more users under the Splunk umbrella, but it will also accelerate their ability to really get the outcomes that they want. And then finally, the last thing, and at the sort of the philosophical level with generative AI is we see a whole new suite of infrastructure, services, and applications coming into the enterprise to support the innovation around generative AI. And what we want to be at the cutting edge of at Splunk, where we always have been, is helping our customers monitor those services and those applications, help them innovate with confidence that they are secure and that what they're building is going to be reliable. And we think there's a lot of opportunity for us in that because there's new infrastructure, there's new challenges, but there's also new compliance and new regulation likely coming. And we think we can really help customers there.
That makes a lot of sense, Patrick. Finally, Eugenio, we've talked a bit about this with Okta. How do you see the generative AI and pulling in these cross-app signals? What value can that bring for you?
I sometimes wake up in the morning and I can't believe I live in the world we live in. I grew up in a place where there was no phones. So imagine now living in a place where I can type instructions and have something respond in a way that it feels like I'm talking to somebody. It's magic. So from in our world, maybe one very pragmatic application that we are exploring, it's very similar to what Patrick was describing. One of our products is it's a fine-grained authorization product. And so if you think about coarse grain is easy. You're authenticated, you're not. But fine grain is like, can you read this document? Can you edit this document? Does anybody in the engineering department be able to access this resource? It's a very complex domain. So like Splunk, we do have a domain-specific language, which is pretty difficult to learn and master and be really proficient. And because it's authorization, if you make a small mistake, it can lead to dire consequences. So one of the things that we did is like this Copilot use case, which is pervasive now. So Copilot for authorization, and that you just write it in English. Anybody in engineering can read any document in this folder. Anybody in finance can approve expense reports, up to $10,000, whatever. That expression, it's translated into actual code that it's enforced in the right way. So the bar of entry for that has come down like orders of magnitude. And then maybe from a more philosophical perspective, and this is something that we are pondering about yet, haven't fully thought about it, but there could be a world in which each one of us will have like proxies of ourselves. So you can write an agent that is going to be you in some action, in some setting. And so when that agent that it captures your who you are, etc., acts on your behalf, is it you or is it an agent? Is it like a power of attorney that you're giving it to this entity? And so that, I think, brings interesting questions from an identity and access management point of view, because do you allow the thing to go and pay everything or pay your mortgage, or how far do you go into the scope of access that you're giving it to that? And you might have like hundreds of those, not just one. You can have like thousands. There's no limit of how you multiply yourself. So
Definitely some interesting philosophical questions that come with Gen AI.
We're trying to figure out, now that bots have joined the team, how can we be the interface between human teams and bots that are working on their behalf? Particularly because the cost of creating new content goes way, way down. So a team might have jammed on a document together, and now they can say, hey, bot, go give me 10 drafts. And then the team works together to proof, iterate, think together, and then reprompt. And so the way that teams work, the effort of breaking a big problem down and then having a series of bots and people work together to solve that problem is going to require a whole new set of interfaces. And Fabric will then allow access to all of the more and more work material to be able to bring that interface together. So we're excited about that.
That's very interesting. I'm excited about that too. Maybe just to add to that.
Sure.
So we've talked about Fabric, App Fabric really, initially doing normalized logs, but eventually offering more capabilities as well. The context and content from other applications and what users are doing is, I think, very valuable. And so maybe Alex, I could start with you, and we know about the Asana Work Graph and what you have there. Perhaps you can talk about how the combination of that content and context from outside other applications can kind of work with the work graph and enhance that.
Yeah. So just you mentioned this notion of the work graph. We could give a 2-second primer on that.
Yes.
So what makes Asana kind of unique is that the back end is not like a spreadsheet or a table. It's a graph database.
Right.
And we were built by Dustin Moskovitz, who co-created the social graph. So we took the social graph and applied it to a business context. And that allows you to have a single source of truth across all the work of who's doing what by when. And then you can have your own different views of that work, but the work is consistent. So that's different than spreadsheets trying to talk to spreadsheets, or people trying to decipher them in status meetings, which is kind of a pretty bad waste of time.
Yeah.
But what's great is when that graph comes to life because it's structuring the data about work and making sense of it. And when with the help of App Fabric, we can then take more of the unstructured data about work from email and calendar applications, from document repositories, and make it structured, part of the context around how a project actually gets done, so individuals can be more likely to be successful with that context. Then the work graph itself becomes more powerful. Asana becomes more powerful, and people become more successful.
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe similar question to you, Patrick. When App Fabric brings more context and content from outside applications, how can that improve the experience of Splunk users?
Yeah, I mean, you said it, I think, in your opening. One of the things that we think a lot about, it used to have to be with Splunk products is you had to bring all the data into Splunk. And if you really wanted to get the value out of Splunk, the data had to live in Splunk. And I think in this first iteration of App Fabric, you simplified a lot of the challenges around getting data into Splunk products across a suite of diverse SaaS applications, which is a huge challenge and will pay dividends for our customers. I think when we think about the future, what better way to empower a customer than to give them choice about where the data actually lives, right? And so at Splunk, we have a whole roadmap of innovation around federated search and the ability to allow customers to derive analytical value from their data regardless of where it may sit in their environment. And we want to bring the same power of innovation that we brought to indexing data to performant federated search and deriving alerts and detections across data.
Maybe taking actions eventually.
And then eventually taking actions, right? And we have orchestration and automation that can do that. But how do we then use generative AI to have better fidelity in the detection coverage, and then recommended actions to actually remediate the problems, right?
Yep.
So that's something that we're thinking a lot about at Splunk.
That sounds super useful, like full cycle, right?
Yeah.
And having that broader context. Similar question for you, Genio, from an identity perspective. I think App Fabric is going to bring you a lot of context and content from other applications. How can that enhance from an identity point of view?
Well, I think it's also like what's being described. It's two bi-directional, right? So we generate.
That's right. It goes both ways.
We generate a lot of events
Yes.
as part of the act of logging in,
That's
or challenge a user with multi-factor, or enrolling, a sign up, or All of that, it's like there's like a myriad of events that our system can generate.
In fact, at launch, we're actually normalizing logs from Okta into
Yes.
Splunk.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's right.
So that's a great use case for us because now every Okta customer essentially has already, through this integration, like they have access to a normalized log that we didn't have to build. I mean, we have our own schema like everybody else. We came up with our own, event structure, but now it's OCSF. And so now it just works, which is awesome. But then there's like the other direction, which is those insights informing us into what we need to do. Because we think of identity not as a yes or no spectrum. It's easy to think of identity again as authenticated or anonymous. But you can also think of identity as a continuum, and you can be like 0.7%, 0.7 logged in. Like if you open a session in the morning and you leave your computer open for 3 days, you might be 1 authenticated on Monday, but then you might be 0.7.
Doesn't need to be binary.
3 days later. So maybe we can use that insight together with other things that we collect from other interactions of the user to see, do we need to elevate from 0.7 to 0.9 because you're doing something sensitive. So if you're browsing a catalog, it might be okay to be 0.7. But if you're updating your personal information, we might need to elevate the assurance that you are who you say you are. And that assurance could come from other sources. So being able to inform us, our engine, to challenge the user, it's also going to be super useful.
Very cool. Well, I'll say whenever we meet customers and they talk about their modern application layer and best of breed, you're all names that come up. And I think it's humbling to be up here with you and hear your insights. Okta,
Thank you.
Splunk, Asana, all leaders in the space. Thank you very much for sharing insights.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, congratulations.